and mystery.
I am the ghost of Christmas yet to come. Ebenezer Scrooge, I am about to show you the shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us.
Ghost of the future! I fear you more than any specter I've seen. Lead on! Lead on! The night is waning fast, and it is precious time.
Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. And suddenly, they were in a room which Scrooge seemed to remember having seen before, where a woman and a child were.
Oh, my son, my little son, Tiny Tim. I loved him so.
Mother, dear, you mustn't. It's almost time for Father to be home. Don't let him see you crying.
Yes, Mother. He's late tonight. He walks slower than he used to. And yet, I've known him to walk very fast indeed, with Tiny Tim on his shoulder.
So have I, Mother.
But he was light to carry, and his father loved him so that it was no trouble. No trouble at all. Bob.
Good evening, my dear.
You're late, Bob.
I'm sorry, my dear. I went to the churchyard today. I wish you could have gone with me. It would have done your heart good to see how sweet and green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised Tiny Tim we'd walk there on a Sunday.
Oh, Bob.
It's God's will, my dear.
Oh, my son, my little son. Tiny Tim. I loved him so. Oh.
Scrooge tried to break through the shade that held him to talk with Bob Cratchit, to speak some word of comfort, but the sleeve of the ghost of Christmas yet to come passed in front of him and shut the family from his view. And now they were in an obscure part of the town where Scrooge had never been before. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people drunken, slipshod, ugly. The whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Deep in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling pawn shop where iron, old rags, and bottles were bought. And there was an old charwoman standing at the counter.
Undo my bundle, Joe.
I hope Scrooge didn't die of nothing catching, eh?
Don't be afraid. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd take a chance at that. You may look through that shirt till your eyes ache, and you won't find a hole in it. The best he had, and a fine one, too. He'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me.
What you call a wasting of it, Mrs. Dilbert?
Putting it on him to be buried in. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off him again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it ain't good enough for anything. It can't look uglier than he did in that one, the old horror. And here's his bed curtains. Small use he'll have for him where he's going.
That's the truest word, you ever spoke, Mrs. Dilbert.
So this is the end of him, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive to profit us when he was dead.
The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it revealed another place, a churchyard walled in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite. A worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down toward it, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name,
Ebenezer Scrooge.
Spirit, am I the man who lay dead upon that bed?
The spirit pointed from the grave to him and back again, and the upper portion of its deep black garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if it had inclined its head.
Ebenezer Scrooge.
And then Scrooge saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrank, collapsed, and dwindled into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own, the bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all. The time before him was his own to make amends in. Running to the window, he opened it. He put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance in. Golden sunlight, heavenly air. Sweet, fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. Oi! What's the day?
Hey, what's that, sir?
What day is it, my fine fella?
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
Christmas Day? Christmas Day! That I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. All in one night. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all the world.
Scrooge was early at his office. He went early for a reason. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he'd set his heart upon, and he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15, no Bob. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come in. At last he came. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter, too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock.
8 and 7 and 15, carry the 1, 24, carry the 2, 31 and 5, 36, 4 and 7.
Hello? You, Cratchit.
Yes, sir.
Cratchit? Step this way, Cratchit, if you please.
Yes, sir.
Cratchit. What do you mean by coming in at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am behind my time.
Here you are. Yes, I think you are.
It's only once a year, Mr. Scrooge. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
And I'll tell you what, my friend. I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. Therefore, Bob Cratchit, I'm about to raise your salary.
Are you quite yourself, sir?
No, thank heaven, I'm not quite myself. Merry Christmas, Bob. Merry Christmas, my good fella. A Merry Christmas, and I've given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary, and we'll see what we can do for Tiny Tim, the rest of your family. We'll discuss it this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires, make 'em up, and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another eye. Bob Cratchit.
And Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more, and to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and of all of us. And so as Tiny Tim observed. God bless us, everyone.
Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord. Sing hallelujah, sing hallelujah, sing glory to the Lord.
You have just heard the 4th annual presentation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, offered for your enjoyment by the makers of Campbell's Soups. And here is Orson Welles.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first year I've shared in this happy tradition of the Campbell Playhouse, and I'm only sorry that very, very grand actor, Lionel Barrymore, was not able to come to New York this Christmas to be part of our broadcast tonight. We're depending upon him to be with us next year, as he's been in the past, and I'm looking forward to it. And now, a word about next week's show. Next Friday night, I shall have the great pleasure of welcoming as our guest star one of the most elusive stars in motion pictures, Miss Katharine Hepburn. Miss Hepburn, making her first radio appearance in more than 4 years, joins me in a dramatization of Ernest Hemingway's greatest novel, Farewell to Arms. Ladies and gentlemen, the night before Christmas, and all through the Campbell Playhouse, not a creature is stirring that doesn't wish you a Merry Christmas. This goes for all of us, for my sponsor, for myself, for all of us, from Johnny Dietz, who runs the machinery in the control room, to Miss Hess, who types the Campbell Playhouse scripts. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas from all of us to all of you. Merry Christmas. Benny Herman and his band of merry melodians wish you a Merry Christmas. Ora Nichols and her demon crew of sound technicians wish you a Merry Christmas. Orson Welles and his considerable aggregation of dramatic talent, including Hiram Sherman, who played Bob Cratchit, Ray Collins, who was the man who asked for alms, Frank Reddick, who was the ghost of Christmas yet to come, Eustace Wyatt, who was the ghost of Christmas present, Arthur Anderson, who was the ghost of Christmas past, Al Shirley, who was Marley's ghost, Alice Frost, who was the charwoman, Brenda Forbes, who was Mrs. Cratchit, Joseph Cotton, who was Nephew Fred, Anna Stafford, who was Belle, Kingsley Colton, who was Tiny Tim, and George Spelman, who was Mr. Peswig. All wish you a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas!
And finally, as Tiny Tim says,
God bless us, everyone.
Don't fail to listen in next Friday night when Orson Welles brings to the Campbell Playhouse Miss Katharine Hepburn in his own dramatization of Ernest Hemingway's great novel, A Farewell to Arms. This is Ernest Chappell wishing you all a very Merry Christmas on behalf of the makers of Campbell's Soups. This is the Columbia Broadcasting System.